intention to kill. I wasn't careful. I fell off the ladder on someone and he died. I shot straight into the forest and he put his head out. All of these things I had to be more careful. Is working? No, there's a problem. It's broken.
Yeah, we'll have to
Give it support. Give it support.
Talk to Moshe after,
It's got.
Okay.
What if we put like a book behind it, just like this case? Or is that about it, please?
Anyone want an orange?
I'm asking everyone right now for the next minute to go through the nine verses. To go through the 9 verses, I want to pick up something. Right now, go through the 9 verses of Yeshua, and then we're starting right away.
You want one, dude?
No, thank you.
Okay.
The simple meaning of the chapter, the most important for us, is the opening of the chapter. Why? It opens up, and I'm reading Vaydaber Adonai el Yoshua lemor, and now it says Daber el bnei Yisrael lemor, provide for them tunu lechem et arei miklat asher dibarti lechem be'ad Moshe. Nowhere ever in the Nevi'im, in the books of prophets, do we meet up with the wording Vayidaber Hashem. That's a typical opening in the Chumash. What does it say? Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe. So why does it right here? Because this Dibor to Yoshua is just like the Dibor to Moshe. The speech here is just like that. Don't touch it so it doesn't fall. Okay? What are we learning from this? My dear friends, we said initially, and we learned from the Torah, and it states here as well, there are going to be 6 arei miklat, 6 cities of refuge. 3 on the west side of the Jordan River, and another 3 on the east side of the Jordan River. A sum total of 6. Moshe Rabbeinu knew and learned from God the Torah law of the following, that as long as we don't conquer Western Eretz Yisrael, and we don't apportion the lands according to the respective tribes, then the 3 cities of refuge on the east side of the Jordan River will not function, will not absorb Rotzeach B'Shogeg, someone that killed by accident, until when? Until the 3 on the west side begin to function. Now, in our chapter 20, towards the finale of Sefer Yoshua, we have just learned about 7 years of war, 7 years of apportioning the land according to the 12 tribes. The central Mizbeach is moved to Shiloh. Everything's apportioned. And now we come to the next major function. And now the land of Israel is ready for a new social and ethical order. And that is setting aside the 3 cities of refuge on the west side. Moshe Rabbeinu acted he was swift, alacrity, quickness. He knew that even though the 3 that he's setting aside on the east are not going to function until years later, but he wanted to do the mitzvah of setting the 3 aside. Therefore, Yoshua now is completing the mitzvah that began years ago by Moshe Rabbeinu. Therefore, it's very unique. You should have Yoshua 20. It's very unique that the Torah uses the language Vayedaber Hashem El Yoshua, just like in the Chumash. So the same signon, style, is used here in the Torah. It's clear to you, and I want to talk about in a few moments after I get according to the Pshat, that as it says in Pasuk Gimel, Lanush Shama Rotzeach, who can run away to an Ir Maklat, anyone that kills, Makei Nefesh B'Shagah, someone unintentional killing, Bivli Dat, he didn't notice. We're going to learn about an important principle. This word Da'at, to know, He didn't know when he killed this person. He didn't know he was there. When he fell down, he didn't know there was someone underneath him. Or he didn't know that the stage of the ladder was broken. Mistakes happen. That's how a rotzech b'shogeg. But you know what? We have to talk about Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is Eretz HaDa'at. The word without da'at is mentioned in Bamidbar 35 in this section, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, when we're talking about the subject, Arei Miklat. Eretz Yisrael requires awareness. Eretz Yisrael requires awareness of life, awareness of godliness, awareness of values. This person who was not aware enough made the mistake. He has a right to run as fast as possible before this guy of the family gets heated up and takes the law into his own hands like they do somewhere in the south where you come from. Okay? Pasuk Daled, V'nasa elachat me'arim ha'ela. He'll run to one of the cities, we said 3 on the east side, 3 on the west side. V'amad petach sha'ar. The guy that killed by mistake will stand at the entrance to the city, which is protective to him. That's why it's called klita, absorption, liklot, reception. V'diber bo'oznei ziknei ha'yarahi. He's going to speak to the elders, meaning the Sanhedrin, the court. Of course, the court will litigate, accept witnesses. Is it indeed b'shogeg, by mistake, by accident, or not? If it is, then he will live there, right? And if the family of the deceased is in pursuant in verse 5, okay? V'chiyurdof goel adam, the redeemer of the blood is called, as we saw in Bamidbar 35, acharav. Can we send out the killer? No. V'lo yaskiru et harotzech bi'adam. What is the word in English when you send him out? Let's say you send him out to another country for judgment. What is it called?
Extradition.
So v'lo yasgiru, they're not going to extradite the rotzech to his hand. Why? Look in verse 5. Ki bivli da'at hika et re'ehu. Okay, he smote his friend without knowledge, without knowing it. V'lo sonehu lo, he's not someone that hates him, and he'll stay there until when? Until the passing away of the Kohen Gadol. What does the Kohen Gadol have to do with this? Why is the length or duration of the killer inside the Ir Miklat until the life of the Kohen Gadol? Rashi, based on the Gemara Masechet Makot in Bamidbar 35, where this mitzvah appears as one of the Taryag mitzvot.
Oh, it's a Taryag.
Tell them what Taryag is. It's not a sauce for vegetables. What is Taryag?
Sounds like.
I don't know.
Let's write it. Taryag is 613. Tafel, Reish, Yud Gimel.
So Taryag has the gematria value.
Exactly. This mitzvah of setting aside arei miklat, 6 of them, is one of the Taryag mitzvot, like we said in Bamidbar 35, Deuteronomy chapter 6.
I have a question.
And you stay there, the rotzech b'shogeg, until the passing away of the Kohen Gadol. What does he have to do with it?
Because he should have prayed for them. On Yom Kippur, Kohen Gadol prays at this thing.
One meaning in Masechet Makot, very nice. Another meaning in Masechet Makot that Rashi in the Torah in Bamidbar 35 explains. You can ask the gentleman sitting next to you. The role or function of the high priest is to bring what into the world?
Kedusha.
Kedusha, the Shekhinah. If there's more divine presence in the world, there's a lengthier life in the world. Whereas the Rotzeach, the killer, what is he doing? By not being careful, he's removing the Shekhinah. The land of Israel has a neshama. The land of Israel does not tolerate murder, even though murder has nothing to do with the land. The land of Israel, as we were learning in the book of Bamidbar, does not tolerate adultery. It has nothing to do with the land, neither idolatry. The land of Israel is holy. It has an inner character. It's hugged with inner treasures. This murderer is coming to remove the Shekhinah. He's coming to shorten the lives of people. Is not just the opposite of the Kohen Gadol. Therefore, he shouldn't be walking around Israel where the Kohen Gadol is alive, because he's coming to shorten the lives of people, whereas the Kohen Gadol is coming to lengthen the life of people. That's how Rashi explains based on the Gemara Masechet Makot. Your question, Mr. Ariel?
If the court ruled that it was an intentional, then why would
If it was
Why would-
intentional,
unintentional?
then why what?
Why would the family of the deceased or killed
No, they're running. They're hot. They're angered right away. They're running at when they're hot. Right after the incident happened, before he was tried in court. That's what it's talking about.
Oh, before.
Absolutely. That's
okay.
shot in the words here and also in Bamidbar 35. Hirsch, your question?
So Taryag, is this an actual word or does it?
Yeah, we make it into a word. Tough ratio gimel is the letters. It's not a word.
Not real
It's-
words. No nikudo, no.
That's
placement.
right. Yeah, it's pronounced Taryag.
Yeah.
Okay. You see the names of the cities in verse 7. Kedesh Bagalil. There's a mitzvah to divide the three, apportion them that they be equidistant from one another. It's a Gemara based on the words Vishilashta. Vishilashta from the word Shalosh. Divide them into three. Divide the country into three. So no matter where you are, if you killed accidentally, you can
Make it there.
run and make it there. So we're told what we learned already in the Torah. Kedesh in the Galil. That's by the Naphtali Mountains. In verse 7, you're looking inside, of course. Vet Shechem, Bar Ephraim, that's central Israel. Shechem is the center of Shomron. Vet Kiryat Arba, Chevron. In this time, Yerushalayim is not yet conquered to the Jewish people. Parts of Yerushalayim are still not in our hands. So we have Chevron in the south, Shechem in the center of the Shomron, and Kedesh in the upper Galilee.
North and south.
North, center, and south. That's correct. Whereas on the other side of the Jordan River, in verse 8, Ume Aver, what is the word Aver on the other side? La Yarden, Yericho, Mizracha, Natnu et Betzer Bamidbar, that's south, Bamishor Mimater Reuven of Reuven's area, Ramot Bagilad, Ramot are the high areas of the Giladi mountains from the Gad, the tribe of Gad, and Golan Babashan. Golan is a city in a region called Bashan, and that belongs to Matei Menachem. My dear friends, I want to share with you some very important points here. This subject that we're studying here today, the cities of the refuge. Remember, we mentioned this comes to the finale of Sefer Yoshua. At the conclusion of the division of lambs of tribes, we learn about today the cities of refuge. Next week in our shur, we'll learn about the cities of the Levium. They too will be cities of refuge for Arotzech B'Shogeg. However, there'll be halachic differences. There'll be 42 cities distributed to the Levim across the country, plus the 6, sum total 48. Mem Chet. We saw that this week in something else. What is Mem Chet? A brain. Pronounce the word. Moach. Moach. Mem Chet is the brain.
What the brain?
Memchet is brain in Hebrew.
Oh.
Moach.
Okay.
Numerically, it's 48. My dear friends, Klal Yisrael has a need, a social, a spiritual, ethical need for cities designated for mistakes of killing. This gives us a better understanding the full spiritual value of what the land of Israel is about and the terrible sin of taking a life away. The cities of refuge are like outsider cities. People that made these severe mistakes are living there together with correctional officers. No, we're not talking about the U.S. prison system or even the Israeli prison system, which is all British law. We're talking about Torah correction. The people living in the city are Leviim, educators, scholars, allowing exactly what you said, Hirsch, the correction in their life to be careful. Da'at, 1 second.
This
Sir.
reminds me of what Rob Frankenthal was talking about with the federal prisons.
We'll talk about that, B'ezrat Hashem. This has significance to the Jewish people and the inheritance of the land of Israel. Remember, the tribes of Israel, they didn't get their area in the land of Israel by a natural way. They did according to God. Remember, there was a lots were drawn. The presence of the Kohen Gadol with him wearing the Urim, V'tumim inside the Choshen Mishpat. The Goral, the lot system was used. What does this teach us? If you're from this tribe and he's from that tribe, your place where you're living in Israel, you didn't decide where to live. Who decided where you're going to be living?
Hashem.
Hashem decided. In other words, the place of man, of Israel in our world, is decided by God. Not by mere incidents, is a nickname of God called Ha-Ma-Kom. Have you heard that before?
The place.
That God is called Ha-Ma-Kom? In about an hour from now, I'm going to pay a consolation call to a dear friend of Machon Meir. He's sitting shiva because of the loss of his sister. How will the traditional way that we comfort a person sitting in mourning in the Ashkenazic circles, Hamakom Menachem otcha, may the place, the omnipresent, comfort you amongst the other mourners of Zion and Israel. Hamakom. God is the place of the world, my dear friends. Remember that. God is the place of the world, and man's place in this world. A lovely article read by Rabbi Yigal Ariel from the Golan on this subject. He writes, man's place in his world is designated by his connection to God. God decides which tribe is going to live in which area. Remember, the Levim also, which will be the subject of our shore next week, the decision to set 42 cities. All you 12 tribes will have to give an allowance. 42 divided by 12. Everyone have to give 3+ cities from you Naphtali, you Gad, you Reuven, you Shimon, you Yehuda, and you Asher. You're going to have to give of your cities a place for who to live?
Leviim.
The Leviim. The Leviim, like these cities of refuge, they don't have a place of inheritance because the inheritance of the Leviim is God himself. Remember, the Leviim's job in this world is what? To serve God. Okay? The God of Israel is the inheritance of the Leviim. Therefore, there's not one specific region that the tribe of Leviim are living, but rather they're going to be living dispersed, as we'll see next week, in all parts of Eretz Yisrael. So too, Leviim are different. So too, the cities of refuge, they too. They're set up for these killers, these murderers, who lost their place. Do you understand what's happening? They've lost their place in the world. They now have to move themselves, their honors, move away to a city that has divine protection. Who cannot go into the city?
The family.
The family of the murdered. Okay? What's that?
How's supposed to know?
Who's supposed to know? There's going to be signs. Very good. The Gemara explains. There's going to be signs. This is a city of refuge in Ir
Yeah,
Miklat.
but how are the people in the city, the guards and everything, how are they going to know that this person's alive?
Look, I know you work for the Ministry of Interior. You have a printout of all the family members, their IDs and their pictures.
Okay.
I'm sure you're pretty smart, right?
Okay.
So there's going to be like a checkpoint?
It's kind of like
Yeah, you're going to be doing the guard duty, sir.
unofficial.
Gentlemen, the fact that the nations of the world do not have this system, okay, expresses that there's a special element that the settlement of the land of Israel provides that no other land in the world will provide. Any nation in the land, gentlemen, in their land, can decide what privileges and rights to give their citizens, what privileges and rights residents can have and settlers have. That's not the case of Am Yisrael. Our Torah, the Torah of the Jewish people, is the source of delegation. The Torah will give rights or not give you rights, privileges. It will award the settlers their privileges to which towns and cities. But you know what? God says the land of Israel and the nation of Israel has to solve a major problem, and that's regarding unintentional murder. Unintentional murder. We have to solve the problem, like you said, Hirsch, where their correction is going to be. So the Torah is dictating a solution to this major problem. And therefore, you all know, as we're learning the Sefer Yoshua, settlement in the land of Eretz Yisrael is not like ordinary or common places in the world. Okay, I need a place to settle in Iceland or New Zealand or in Germany or in Africa. And it brings you a peace of mind. It brings you some tranquility, maybe wealth to those very successful. But rather in Eretz Yisrael, it's different. Settlement in Eretz Yisrael has to solve also the problems that we have in the Jewish people. It has to solve behavioral problems. It has to solve ethical problems. And we have to find, like you said, Hirsch, correction to their sins, correction to the sinners. And the correction for sin can only come from the source of holiness of the Torah. Okay? From the holy, sanctified land of Israel as well. The land, the Torah, and the nation are a tri-part harmony. They're interconnected. Just like the filthy sin of adultery that a married woman commits. Remember how she's corrected? What do you remember, David? A married woman, suspected by her husband of adultery. Do you remember what the Torah dictates what has to be done to her? You have to bring her to the Beit HaMikdash.
Yeah, right. So the Kohen gives you like some something to drink with, which is like, I don't know, sand or something.
Dirty water.
A bitter water, right?
Very good.
And,
That's the bitter water is excellent.
Yeah.
That's the woman called the Sotah woman. Do you remember the name now? Sotah. She deviated. So just like if a married woman committed a filthy or suspected of a filthy sin of adultery, and she can only be corrected by pouring a special portion, the Sotah woman, in the Beit HaMikdash, that means the Beit HaMikdash can correct this broken family that's filled with the suspicion that she's cheating on her husband. So too, in this way, the cities of the Levium, remember, 42 cities, which will be next week's subject, they, plus the 6 of the Arei Miklat, they will be able to correct the sin of a Rotzeach B'Shogeg, a murderer who committed murder by accident. Yes, Hirsch.
So does the same consequence of action also apply to adulterous husbands? Will they receive the same?
No, that's a different matter, different laws.
How?
We'll get to that when we get to the laws of adultery. Here in Yoshua, Sefer Yoshua, the elders of the Ir Miklat, as we see here in verse 6, we said it before, they will absorb them. You have Miswara Klita. Who's going to be working at the entrance to these 6 cities? Officials that are elders, scholars. They will judge them or defend them so that the city can or cannot absorb this Rotzeach B'Shogeg. So it's the leaders, it's the judges. So we see here, in summary, that the Torah cares for 2 diametrically opposite sectors of Jewish society. On the one hand, our subject today, the murderers B'Shogeg by accident. Next week's subject, the Leviim. Together, structurally in the Torah, they appear at the end. What do I mean? In the book of Bamidbar, with the end of Bamidbar, we first learn about the borders of the land of Israel. Okay, and after we learn about the borders of the land of Israel in Bamidbar chapter 35 or 34, then, interestingly enough, the order there is, you should check it out yourselves, the cities of refuge and the cities of Levium. Why is that the order? Because we're talking about the extremities of society. The cities of refuge and the Levium, they're not the major central run of society. Levium don't have it in a portion in the land. A Rotzeach B'Shogeg is asked to leave his home, leave his honor, and go and get correction. So too, here in the book of Sefer Yoshua. Sefer Yoshua, we see only after the apportioning of the land, all of the land first, the moving of the great altar to Shiloh, and now we're setting up a system of social and moral correction for the cities of refuge, for Rotzeach B'Shogeg, 3 on the east side, 3 on the west side, and they will stay there for the entire duration until the life ends of the
Kohen Gadol.
Kohen Gadol. I want to say one more point. They settle together. They're living together. Who's the neighbor of these murderers?
The Kohen.
Levim and Kohanim. Who are the neighbors of the Kohanim and Levim?
Murders.
The murderers.
Or the manslaughters.
Isn't that interesting?
Wait.
Say that again?
I'll say it again. I'm not waiting. I'm going to say it again. We just learned that these cities of refuge are 6 cities altogether.
Mhm.
They're part of a greater scheme that we'll learn next week. That'll be 42 cities of the Levium. The Levium will live in 42 plus these 6.
Mhm.
And therefore, they're going to be creating the most of the populace in these cities for the exact reason that you mentioned before, spiritual correction. Eretz Yisrael needs da'at. Remember, they killed without da'at. They were not aware. They were not knowledgeable that you were there. They were not knowledgeable that the ladder was broken. They were not knowledgeable about all these freaky accidents. So we have here these 2 parts of society, Leviim and the murderers, settling together in the same cities. And they are the correction of the spiritual development of the Rotzech B'Shogeg. It's imposed on who? Not on a correction prisoner officer in your British American system of prisoners, where when they come out of jail, they're ready to commit the same sins time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
But here, the correction is imposed on the educators of Israel. Which tribe is destined to be the educators of Israel? Levium. That's what I wanted to share with you here. Before I go forward of 2 other points, I wanted to hear your, Mr. Usher. Achilot.
So, when they're running to the city and the family's chasing after them, if the family catches them, are they allowed to kill him?
Mm.
They don't ask questions. If they kill him, they're innocent. That's what the Torah says in Bamidbar 35, as explained in the Gemara Masechet Makot. We're talking about hot-headed people, not people like you that are not hot-headed.
I don't know. If they accidentally got one on you, I might run them down in there.
Gentlemen, you had a question also, Ariel?
Yeah, so if there's these like correction cities with like correction officers and Levium, does that mean there's no, in the Torah, there's no jail or prison?
That's right.
These are the
Right.
jails.
That's right.
It's just a. It's
You
a
see the guy in
place to
back
live
of you?
Prison abolition?
Do you see the guy in back
Yes,
of
in the
you?
Torah, there's no prison.
Do you see the guy in back of you? He's stealing all the time. He's stealing all the time. If we bring him to Torah law and say, you just stole 10,000 shekels, pay back.
And then you don't go.
Pay back how much?
Yeah, it
How
depends.
much he stole plus 20%?
No.
Oh.
If
He stole 10,000 shekels. Who knows the law?
If-
Book of Shemot. Come on, you guys know.
if he comes forward and confesses it, he pays it back. If he gets caught, then he has to pay back double.
Thank you.
Hmm.
He pays double. Huh? I'm going to pay back double. I'm not going to steal. I'm not going to steal
Well,
again.
how do you make him pay it back? Like we're going to cut your hand off?
We
if you
have
don't?
one.
Like,
It's not the subject.
Part of Hammurabi?
My dear friends, I want to share with you until the end of the shiur some ideas by a wonderful sefer, a great rabbi, Rabbi Avram Remer, in blessed memory, one of the special students of Rav Tzvi Cook and builders of Beit El. He was a high school Rebbe of the Rav Kook Yeshiva High School, put out a fantastic sefer. It actually came after his passing, if I'm not mistaken, by his dear son. I knew him very well. I was also studied by him in the teaching seminary. I want to share with you 2 short ideas to, I think, put the icing on the cake, as we say. We're learning here that the land of Israel is a partner with the nation of Israel to bring tshuva and to bring atonement. Okay? When we're in the galut, it's hard for us to think about what a piece of land is part of a correction system. Okay? Only when we come into the land of Israel, 40 years of the desert, we come into the land of Israel. We learn the first 19 chapters of the book of Yeshua. The land is settled. The land is apportioned. Here, the commandment starts off. Remember the style we started off at the beginning of the chapter? Vayidaber Hashem El Yeshua. What did we say, David Adler? It's just like what style?
Just like in the Chumash.
Just like in the Chumash. Exactly like in the Chumash. It's the only time in the Tanakh in the books of prophets. Vayidaber Hashem el Yeshua, just like Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe. What is it teaching us? We said the Malbim, one of the great later commentaries that you're using in your Shur for Ezra Nehemiah with the great Rabbi Weinstein. He brings this point and says, here we're learning about the finale of a mitzvah that started in the Chumash. Remember, Moshe Rabbeinu himself set aside 3 on the east side of the Jordan River. But we said at the beginning of the shur that they will not function as cities of refuge until 3 are designated on the west side of the Jordan River. They will not work. So we're learning here that the objective of Eretz Yisrael, and of course the primary part of Eretz Yisrael is the western side of the Jordan River, this land has the ability to protect the man that killed accidentally. This law has been known for 40 years already, gentlemen, ever since the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. And Moshe wanted to bring it into reality. Yet the ability to realize this objective can only be experienced after Aleph, we settle the land, and Bet, the land is apportioned. It just shows the importance of settling the land, like the Jewish people are doing right now in our generation right now. Only after the land is apportioned and we're settling the land does this section called Arei Miklat, can it now function as one of the Tariag mitzvot, as one of the 613 mitzvot. Point number 2, Eretz Yisrael, we call it Eretz HaChayim. It's the land of life. It's the land of life because there's real life here, divine life here, values that are related to eternity. Okay? We say the Torah is nicknamed Chaye Olam Nata Betochenu, the second bracha of the second bracha of the Aliyah LeTorah, Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet, V'Chaye Olam. He gave us a forever life, Nata implanted inside us. This life in the land of Israel, what's called Eretz HaChayim, we said the land here is a partner in tshuva for the correction of man when man sins. The one that murdered accidentally, it's obviously stemming from not being aware, not having dat, not being careful. Why do we have so many terrible traffic accidents on the roads? Because we're not careful. We're not using our dat. We're playing around with this phone, with this radio, this or that, and terrible things are happening. People are losing their lives. We have to have more da'at, more awareness of what we're doing, and therefore save ourselves from these terrible mistakes. Okay? The one that killed and the one that was killed, they both opportuned to one area, Rav Verma says. Let's say we're talking about the case of climbing this ladder where one of the, what is it called? Stages of the ladder, what is it called in English?
Rung.
One of the rungs of the ladder was broken. You, the one that climbed up, and you, the one standing on the bottom, are both not aware. And he fell on you from the height of, who knows, 10 meters with a metal device, whatever, and an accident happened. A tu'una happened. Of course, it's b'shogeg. It's unintentional. Okay? The one that killed and the one that was killed, they both belong to the accident. But Eretz HaChayim is teaching us we have to be connected to real life. We have to be connected to Dat to be much more aware. And if we're not aware, then we're going to have to be realizing that the land of Israel is a member of Kapara, is a member of Tshuva, correction, like you said before. The land of Israel absorbs the murderer and will stay there. That murder will stay there until the passing away of the Kohen Gadol. Why? Whose project, whose boundary in life is it to give us more awareness of life, more awareness of Torah, more awareness of sanctity, more awareness of God's goodness and His chesed? That is the Kohen Gadol. But he's only an individual. The nation has to stand up and learn from the Kohen Gadol what does it mean to know God, to be more aware, so that we can become a Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh. And therefore, we know that we have to add more da'at in our lives, because Eretz Yisrael is the only Eretz that you can know God. So through Eretz Yisrael, through knowing God, through keeping the Torah, we're preserving this tripart harmony. And that's more or less the subject of the Ir Miklat. We can hit that for right now. I can answer questions right
So
now.
you said that the Leviim are the educators of Israel.
Based upon the blessing of